Hello, welcome to Burke and Hare, the Resurrectionists. The University of Edinburgh Medical School was established in 1726, established to teach all of those wonderful doctors and surgeons who would come to look after us. Its claims to fame are that it is the oldest medical school in the United Kingdom, and indeed one of the oldest in the English-speaking world. It is still revered today, graded between the first and third best in the UK and around 21st in the world. But let's not worry about today, let's go back to the early 19th century. In order to graduate, students had to demonstrate competence in a variety of subjects, including anatomy. Although the majority of these courses were taught within the Edinburgh University, there were also many private anatomy schools in an area called Surgeons Square that could offer these courses. Maybe the University of Edinburgh didn't have enough places, maybe it was a good way to kind of make money at the time. However, all these anatomy schools, in addition to many senior qualified doctors who were carrying out research, required a constant supply of human bodies. What better way to learn anatomy than to dissect a body? At the time, the laws in place forbid the use of any human body being dissected unless it was that of an executed criminal. And so many of those came from the gallows, from the hangings. However, it was not enough to keep up with demand. Not helped by the fact that quite often the laws would change, and indeed one law came about that said, less offences would be given the death penalty and they would go into prisons instead. But as a result, there's a lucrative trade in stolen corpses emerging. Body snatchers, also known as resurrectionists, would prowl cemeteries at night, digging up fresh graves and stealing the bodies. These stolen corpses would then be sold to medical schools. So the controversy surrounding the anatomy trade was not only due to the illegal nature of the activity itself, but the ethical considerations surrounding the use of human bodies for medical purposes. I mean, many families were distraught that their loved ones had been dug up. People believed that the desecration of corpses was morally wrong and disrespectful. Of course it is. But one of the most infamous cases of body snatching in Edinburgh involved two men, and they were both Irish, by the way, William Burke and William Hare. In the early 19th century, Burke and Hare embarked on a murder spree that shocked the city. Instead of just digging up corpses, they decided to take matters into their own hands and began killing people to sell their bodies to medical schools. They targeted vulnerable individuals, homeless, prostitutes, luring them to their lodging house and then suffocating them. In fact, their landlady was one of their victims. They would then sell the bodies to Dr. Robert Knox, who was a prominent anatomist and lecturer at the Edinburgh Medical School, who had his own little private anatomy school as well. How did their crimes come to light? A lodger at their house discovered a body hidden under a bed. How awful. The smell must have been disgusting. The police were called. Burke and Hare were arrested. Hare became state's witness and testified against his partner Burke, who was subsequently tried and convicted of murder. He was sentenced to death and publicly hanged in front of a very, very large crowd. The impact of body snatching in Edinburgh and probably across the UK cannot really be overstated. I mean, the practice has a huge detrimental effect on public health and sanitation. You are moving dead bodies, some of whom have got serious diseases and have died of things. They don't know when they dig them up. So disease spread. The bodies were not often buried properly after being dissected. And then, of course, there's a risk to the whole population. The anatomy trade had a profound effect on medical education and research. The study of anatomy was kind of crucial for aspiring doctors and surgeons, and the availability of cadavers for dissection was essential to their training. I mean, the stolen bodies provided by body snatchers allowed medical students to gain practical knowledge and experience that they otherwise wouldn't get. I mean, you can't dissect an animal and expect to understand the anatomy of a human. Burke and Hare and the history of them have kind of captivated people's imagination for centuries. The gruesome nature of their crimes and the macabre trade in stolen corpses has been the subject of numerous books, plays and films. Indeed, Robert Louis Stevenson, author of the famous The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, wrote a short story called The Body Snatcher. That film, in 1945, was made starring Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi, two of the juggernauts of horror. There's no shortage of body snatcher films. Just a simple Google search will bring up a load. Donald Sutherland, a young Donald Sutherland, stars in The Invasion of the Body Snatchers with Brooke Adams and another young Jeff Goldblum. In recent years, there's been a resurgence of interest in the Edinburgh body snatchers, with new discoveries and research shedding light on this really dark chapter in the city's history. Archaeological excavations have uncovered evidence of body snatching activities, empty graves, discarded coffins. These kind of findings have proved invaluable into looking at the methods and practices of the body snatchers. I mean, could you imagine thinking that your long-held family crypt has got all these bodies in, but all of a sudden half of them are missing? Some historians argue that the body snatchers were not motivated by greed, but also by a desire to prove medical knowledge and advance scientific understanding. I don't happen to think that's true. I happen to think it was a niche that they found they could make money in. However, it has been suggested that they played an important role in the development of modern medicine. I mean, good or bad, their activities helped to establish the importance of anatomy in medical education. And it's kind of forwarded all of our kind of knowledge of where things sit in the human body, what kind of surgeons need to be aware of when they're dissecting and when they're doing operations. But despite these more kind of nuanced perspectives, the legacy of body snatchers remains controversial. Of course, most people still view them as criminals who violated the sanctity of the dead. Some see them pioneers and an important contribution to medical science. Regardless of your perspective, the discoveries and research have provided insights into the kind of darkness of Edinburgh in those days. Could you imagine it? Knowing that bodies were being transported around, worrying about your relatives and even yourself being used in medical anatomy. Lots of myths and legends have emerged surrounding Burke and Hare and their crimes. One says they killed as many as 16 people, although the actual number is believed to be closer to 17 or 18. Some say that they were sold the bodies to Dr. Knox for large sums of money, when actually there was only a small fee for each of the bodies they delivered. So you can imagine this is something that is outlawed, it's illegal, it's immoral, and yet they still did it. Not only did they body snatch, but they killed people. There was murders going on. People were disappearing. So, can you imagine a world where there's not enough bodies to train surgeons, to train medics? They're all trained in the same thing. When dissection in the, second or third year of medical school starts to begin, could you imagine worrying about what's going to happen to your body after it's gone? Some people believe that the body holds nothing. Some people believe it still holds things. It's still important. The remains of your relatives and indeed yourself are very important. Burke and Hare were monstrous, but they were filling a niche, a creation of the local laws, a creation of medical schools, an understanding that when you do one thing in society, it affects another. So the bringing down of the offences from being hanged to just being put in prison has an effect in the number of bodies available. But that kind of whole approach, that kind of seeing the bigger picture, was never really looked at. And so this kind of niche comes up, and there's an opportunity for criminals and people who may just be, so for those sitting on the edge of that criminality and kind of falling into it because of this niche. It is a very dark reminder of where we've come from. It's a dark reminder of what has happened in the advancement of science, in the advancement of medicine, and indeed the trade in animals for medical dissection and biology is still around and in medical research. And so we look at that, and then we look at today, and we contrast the two. Just how far have we come from the days of Burke and Hare? Thank you very much for listening. Bye-bye.